What is in a name? I don't know if you know the story behind your name, why you were named the way you were. My name, for instance, is Matthew Ryan, which means gift of God who is a little king. I try not to let that go to my head. But I remember my parents telling me that when my mom was pregnant with me, they were trying to decide what to call me, and they wanted a biblical name. And they were stuck between Matthew and Bartholomew. So my dad had the bright idea of looking at my mom and saying, how about Matholomew? Combine the two names. And my mom gave a look to my dad. It's a certain look that now that I'm married, I know is a distinctive wife look to a husband when he says something that is just not very smart. And my dad says, how about Matholomew? My mom gives him the look and says, how about Matthew? And that was the end of the conversation. My wife and I currently have 3 children, and we named them very intentionally based on the meaning of their name and the type of people we'd like them to be. My oldest daughter's name means graceful one who is mighty with a spear. She's very much like Saint Joan of Arc. She's very into dance and everything feminine, but she's a fierce personality. Our middle child is our son, and his name means harmonious servant of God. And he very much has embodied that. He's very much like Saint Francis. He'll get down and talk to animals, even somehow mesmerize them in different ways that we can't really explain. And lastly, our youngest daughter, who at this time is about 7 months old, her name means wise and pure. And it's true, she has the purest innocence and joy about her. She's always either smiling or she's intensely studying what she's looking at. Wise and pure. And we really believe they embody the meaning of their names. The way we use names, it says something about our essence, who we are at our very core, what describes us and who we will become. In the Bible, names, words, and language are very important. Like if you look at Genesis in the beginning, in Genesis chapter 1 and 2, it says God created man from the earth. Now the word there for man is Adam, which doesn't necessarily mean man. It comes from the Hebrew word Adamah, which means earth. So Adam kind of means earth creature, earth being, literally created from the earth. And then God, in order that Adam, would have a suitable partner for himself, he creates a woman from his side, essentially separating the earth creature now into 2 beings. And that female is named Eve, which is the Hebrew word for life. And now that life can happen, now at this moment when there are male and female, 2 complementary beings, is the first time where the Hebrew words ish and isha, him and her, are used. So if you know the original language, you can see in the story that man is meant to be one, and then God separates man into man and woman, human beings rather, into man and woman, so that they would come back together and to be one, to be him and her, complementary beings that come together to create Eve, life. All of this is present in the very intentional language used by the writer of Genesis to teach the reader more than what he's simply writing on the page because of the words he's using. There's another story later on in Genesis where Abram, the patriarch, and his wife Sarah, they are the first who are kind of called into this patriarchal and matriarchal relationship with the Lord. And he makes a covenant with them and he says, from Abram, he wants to make a great nation. Well, there's a problem. They're in old age. They're in their 80s and 90s, and they could never have children. And Abram's name in Hebrew means father of many. Now imagine how awful that would be to have gone your entire life being called the father of many with no children at a time and in a culture where your ability to produce heirs and progeny was seen as a blessing from God. I imagine Abram's name felt very much like a curse or an insult to his identity. Probably made him feel ashamed. But God speaks to Abram and he says, your name is now Abraham, which means father of a great many. And I can imagine Abraham then was like, really, Lord? I don't even have a single heir, and you're going to rub it in by making me carry the name of father of a great many? But God says, yes, your descendants will outnumber the stars in the sky. God makes this promise to Abraham numerous times in different ways. And in fact, on one occasion, 3 mysterious strangers come to Abraham and tell him that his wife Sarah will conceive in her old age. And Sarah, his wife, overhears this, and then she starts laughing. God says, I heard you laugh, and because you laughed, your son's name will be Isaac or Itzhak, which is the Hebrew word for laughter. Names have a deep significance all throughout the Bible. Names allow us to be in relationship with each other. Now, why is all of that important for Catholicism? Well, we've talked so far in these past 2 sessions about the fact that we have a built-in desire for God. The desires in our hearts cannot be fulfilled by anything in this world, but we all have these same desires, so logically we must conclude there must be something outside of this world that created us and put us here that can satisfy these desires we all share. We talked about creation and science and the nature of the world, revealing who this creator must be and what he must be like. If he could create all of this and doesn't need us, but we exist, that logically means he loves us, he wants us, he desires us. So we talked about those 2 things, God being revealed in the human person, those desires, creation, the world around us, and then the other way that God reveals himself is in revelation, how he reveals himself. Now, how do we know that this God who reveals himself in our desires and in creation doesn't just desire us in the way that the stories of the Greek and Roman gods of mythology want us, just for blind worship and sacrifice? How do we know that he really wants to be in relationship with us? Because he revealed that. It's because of what happens in Exodus chapter 3. Now, if you've forgotten the story, it goes like this. In the book of Genesis, God is choosing the Hebrew people for himself. There's those patriarchs, Abraham, and then Isaac, and then Jacob, who's named Israel, and then Joseph. And if you remember, Joseph is sold by his brothers into slavery in Egypt. But God uses Joseph's position in Egypt to reconnect him with his family and save them all from a drought. So they all end up moving to Egypt, and they thrive for a few hundred years. But then a pharaoh comes into power who looks at this massively growing Hebrew population that's thriving and has been given all this political power and land, and he sees them as a threat to his own power, and that they will outnumber the Egyptians unless he does something about it. So he enslaves the Hebrew people. To control the population, the Pharaoh orders all male babies to be sacrificed into the Nile River as a sacrifice to the gods. And we start reading this story in Exodus chapter 1, and we read, one baby survives, and his name is Moses. His mother and sister place him in a basket of reeds, and he's floated down the Nile River to the area where Pharaoh's daughter bathes. And she sees this child, and that's why he's named Moses, because Moshe means to draw out of the water. And she decides to raise him as her own. He grows up with the luxury and influence of being part of Pharaoh's family. When he becomes an adult, one day he sees a guard abusing a Hebrew slave, and Moses has this outburst of anger. He sees this injustice, and in trying to intervene, Moses kills the Egyptian guard. Now, he buries this guard quickly in the sand, but soon he finds out that people know what he did. And in fear that it will get back to Pharaoh, he runs off into the desert. He ends up meeting a man named Jethro, who's a shepherd. He marries his daughter, Zipporah, and they have 2 children. And he works for his father-in-law as a shepherd. Years go by, and one day Moses comes upon a mountain where there is a bush that is burning, but it is not consumed by fire. Out of it, he hears the voice of God speak to him, telling him to go back to Egypt to save the Hebrew people. It says in Exodus, Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" God answered, "I will be with you, and this will be your sign that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will serve God at this mountain." "But," said Moses to God, "if I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'Hey, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what do I tell them?" God replied to Moses, "I am who I am." Then he added, "This is what you will tell the Israelites. I am has sent me to you." Now, God is not trying to sound like the Riddler from Batman here. He's not trying to confuse Moses. Moses is looking for assurance or a sense of divine power to help him because he doesn't feel equipped to answer this call from the Lord. You see, it was a belief at the time that if you knew someone's real name, you had power over them. If someone calls my name from afar, I stop and I turn around. That person has exhibited a certain power and influence over my attention. And there was an ancient belief this had a spiritual dimension to it as well. And so for that reason, people often had numerous names. This can be really frustrating when you read the Bible and you're trying to figure out who the 12 apostles are. Bartholomew is sometimes called Nathaniel. Matthew is sometimes called Levi. Jude is also called Thaddeus. Everyone had often a public name and a private name, and sometimes even more public names depending on how their name was translated, let's say from Hebrew into Greek, which was the commonly spoken language at this time of the apostles. So knowing someone's real name made a difference because you commanded power over them. So when we go back 1,200 years before the time of Jesus to Moses asking God his name at the burning bush, what he's asking is, God, can you give me the ability to call upon your power? Can you give me the ability to bring you with me? It's a bold ask for Moses, right? So what does God do? Does he give him a riddle? No, he actually tells Moses his name. Did you catch it? It doesn't sound like it, but this is what God says. I am who I am. I am has sent me to you. Now that phrase, I am who I am, in Hebrew is etye asher etye. I am he who causes things to be. I am that which causes things to exist. That is God's name. That is who he reveals himself to be. Now, when people would write that name in Hebrew, they would abbreviate it, using one or two letters to signify each word out of reverence for God's name, which gives us YHWH, Yod, He, Vav, He, which is where we get the names Yahweh, the name of God, and often the mistranslation, Jehovah. They come from this ancient name of God from Exodus chapter 3. They wrote it this way because even saying God's name or writing it was considered a potential act of blasphemy. God's name was so sacred, you couldn't write it out in its fullness. You needed to abbreviate it to give it reverence. And so they would write it like this, YHWH. And as I said, they couldn't even say it out loud, a crime that could be punishable by death. Only the high priest could say the name of God out loud, and he could only say it once a year on the Day of Atonement, which was around September 21st. This was the one day of fasting in the Hebrew calendar. So the high priest, he would make a sacrifice. He'd go into the holiest part of the temple where they believed God lived, and he would invoke the name of God to ask for the forgiveness of all the sins of all the people. He'd sprinkle the blood of the sacrifice in there where the Ark of the Covenant was, and that's where the presence of God was believed to dwell. Only the highest people in the order of the priesthood could go in there. That's how sacred the dwelling place, the name of God, was believed to be. Many Orthodox and Hasidic Jews today even write G/D when they write God because they don't want to irreverence God's name. They'll also use other words like Adonai, which means Lord. And anytime they think of his name or say it in their head, they bow. So you'll often see Jewish people at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem bowing back and forth in prayer like this. And that's because they're reverencing God's name over and over again as they pray it. So what is significant about all of this? Why does it matter that God told us his name? Well, God is self-identifying with his people. Is that a big deal? Yeah, because no other believed God in any other religion had ever done anything like this before. Think about all of the mythological gods you learned about in school. These are cosmological beings that used humans like chess pieces in stories. They didn't care about humanity, or they only cared about certain groups or individuals in humanity that did them honor or gave them sacrifice and worshiped them. But they used them as pawns without care if they lived or died. They had no desire to have lasting relationships with humanity. But the one true God is not like that. He reaches out his hand and he says, "Hi, my name is Yahweh. Nice to meet you." And when someone asks you your name or offers theirs, it's because some type of exchange is going to happen. It could be as simple as going in line at Starbucks and then asking, "What's your name?" Or because a relationship wants to be built, which is what's happening here. God is saying, I don't want to just give you goods and services. I want you to know me. And the first step of that is for me to tell you who I am. I want a relationship with you. This is such a profound moment in Scripture. We kind of gloss over it as if it's just a children's tale about the background of Moses. We don't recognize how powerful and how important this moment is. Because this moment reveals to us that we have a God who so desperately desires to be in relationship with us that he condescended from the heavens to self-identify with his people, something no believed God had ever done or has ever done since, because he's the one true God who wants to be in relationship with us. So what does all of this reveal to us about God? I think we can glean 4 different things from this. And the first is that God wants us to know that he is with us. You see, God is not distant and far away. He comes down into our reality, breaks into our experience and says, I am who I am. I am he who causes things to be. So if you exist right now, that means God is with you, causing you to exist. He's not distant or checked out or far away. He is not unconcerned with humanity. He is right here in this space with us, with you, always. And he reveals that even further by coming as the person of Jesus. Not only does he show us in his physical form, I want to be with you, but the name Jesus literally means Yahweh saves. I have come to save you. His other name, Emmanuel, from Matthew chapter 1, means God with us. He is telling us, I want to be with you. Every time I reveal myself, every time I come to you, every time I make a covenant with you, I'm trying to tell you, I want to be back in relationship with you. Sin broke that relationship in the beginning, and God knows we can't repair that infinite gap between us and him. So only he can come and repair that on our behalf, and no matter how hard we try, we will always fall short. So he reveals to us who he is, and he comes to die for our sins to remind us that he always is with us and wants a relationship with us. So God says, I am with you. Secondly, he says, I give you life. He wants to remind us that he gives us life. How do we know this? Well, look at the name Yahweh. I pronounced it Yahweh in the letters Yod, He, Vav, He, but actually in Hebrew, this is not really a pronounceable name. All these letters, Y, H, W, H, they're all actually breathing syllables in Hebrew. So to read this would be Yod, He, Vav, He. And so to say Yahweh would actually be unpronounceable. It'd be something like Yahweh. So to say God's name would be more like the sound of breathing. This is how God reveals himself. He reveals himself as a Holy Spirit. And the word to describe the Holy Spirit in every biblical and religious language means breath. In Hebrew, ruach, breath. Pneuma in Greek means breath. It's where we get the phrase pneumatic tubes, tubes that use air and mechanical breath to transport canisters to different places in buildings. In Latin, spiritus, the word for spirit, means breath. That simply by the fact that we can have air in our lungs means we are invoking the name of God and that God is with us, giving us life. It's as if the very moment we can begin to speak, the very moment we can breathe, is when we begin to live because his name is coming out of our lips. Breath. And the very moment we can no longer say his name with our breaths is when we go and meet him. That's how intimately close he is to you. He's willing us into existence at every moment. And he reminds us of that in our breath. He loves us enough to allow people to exist, to blaspheme and curse his very name with the very breath that gives them life. Every day they are saying, God, I don't believe in you. And the only thing that gives them air in their lungs to utter those words is the fact that they are pronouncing the name of God. He loves them that much to let them do it because he has a purpose and a plan for each one of us. So he reminds us he's with us. He gives us life. Thirdly, no matter what you have done, I want a relationship with you. That's what God is saying. No matter what you have done, I want a relationship with you. God doesn't choose Aaron, Moses' older brother, who was a priest and in a position of affluence in the religious community. He chose Moses, the murderer who ran away. And he says to each one of us, it doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter how far you've run from me. I want a relationship with you. He wanted a relationship with Aaron too, and he likely already had one because Aaron was a priest. But I think we can glean from this a reminder that sometimes we disqualify ourselves from a relationship with God because we don't feel worthy. We feel like hypocrites or imposters because of what we've done or failed to do in the past. And we feel like, okay, all these people I see here on a weekly basis at church or in ministry events, they kind of have it all together. They're super holy. They know what they're doing, but I'm still broken. I'm still wrestling. I'm not sure if I agree or even know this God that everyone else around me claims to believe in. I think God revealing himself in this way reminds us that no matter what you have done, no matter where you are at with the Lord, he loves you and wants a relationship with you. Pope John Paul II put it this way. He said, you are not the sum of your faults and failures. You are the sum of the Father's love for you. Brothers and sisters, you are not your mistakes. You are not the worst thing that you've ever done. And that doesn't disqualify you from a relationship with God. You are defined by God's love for you, and he finds you worthy and desires a relationship with you. So God reveals his name, and in doing so, he reveals, I am with you. I give you life. I want a relationship with you. And lastly, I want you to call upon me, and I will call upon you. That's what happens when you learn someone's name. You can call upon them. You can shout across the room, and they will answer. You establish and build that relationship. God is with us, giving us life, and wants a relationship with us, but that's driving us toward a divine purpose. In the Gospel of John, Jesus says, it was not you who chose me, but I who chose you and appointed you to bear fruit that will remain. You guys, we are never the initiator. The Catechism says that even if we reach out to God in prayer, the only reason we have that desire is because God first reached out to us and placed the desire in our hearts. He is constantly chasing after us, constantly calling upon us, constantly placing a divine mission and purpose onto our lives. But he respects us enough to wait and see if we will respond. And he gives us permission to call on him. He tells us his name. He reveals himself to us as a person who's also named Jesus, who comes down into our reality so that we can talk to him, so that we can worship him, so that we can know who has saved us, so that we can have a real, tangible relationship with him. No matter what you have done, no matter what gifts you do or do not have, God desires that. Moses was unqualified. He was not the ideal person that anyone would have picked out of a lineup to go and save the Hebrew people. In fact, he himself says in Exodus chapter 4, if you please, my Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor now that you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and tongue. And the Lord says to him, who gives one person speech? Who makes another mute or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will assist you in speaking and teach you what you are to say. When Moses says that he is slow of speech and tongue, many biblical scholars believe that to mean that he had some kind of speech impediment, like a stutter or a stammer. God didn't choose the eloquent high priest who was already in a relationship with him and already likely a leader. He went out and found a stuttering murderer in the desert who was hiding, and he said, I choose you. We often, in our hearts, look at ourselves like a stuttering murderer out in the desert. We look at ourselves as someone who's unqualified, who's not good enough, who can't stand up in front of a group of people and talk about the Lord. And yet God is choosing you. He chose a broken sinner like me from the distant and sinful place I was running away from him, and he found a way to bring me back and use me, to choose me, to glorify him in the gifts that he's given me. Brothers and sisters, this is why we spend so much time on this. Like, you might be thinking, this is Catholicism